With our esteemed sports commissioners. Before I introduce all of tonight's speakers, who of course need no introduction, I just want to say how thrilled I am to see so many of our Board of Trustees here with us this evening. A special thanks to Stan Schumann and Jeff Sands for being here, and our trustees that are joining us on stage tonight, Gary Bettman, Rob Manfred, and David Zaslav. I want to recognize McKinsey, our long-term and valued official knowledge partner. We thank you for supporting this outstanding event, and we are delighted to have so many of our Media Council members here with us this evening. I want to give a special welcome to all of our new members as well this evening. Before we begin, I just want to tell you briefly about some of our upcoming programs, so get out your calendars. On September 14th, we'll have Mike Hopkins, the CEO of Hulu, will join us for a discussion. And then on October 3rd, Shari Redstone will join us with Advanced partner John Miller, also a Paley board member, both of them. And on December 7th, we'll be with Media Link's chairman and CEO Michael Kasson, who will focus on predicting trends in 2018. In addition to our New York programs, we also host dialogues out in Los Angeles, which all of our members are invited to if you are traveling out that way. The next dialogue will be with Joe Marchese of the Fox Networks Group, who will be in dialogue with Eric Shanks of Fox Sports on September 18th for a conversation on the evolving relationship of advertising in sports. Now, big announcement. On October 25th and 26th, we will be hosting our annual Paley International Council Summit here in New York for a two-day conference on the changing world of global media. Now, many refer to the summit as the Davos of media, and we will once again have an extraordinary program with speakers that will include former U.S. Secretary of State James Baker, 21st Century Fox CEO James Murdoch, and former U.S. Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner will all be joining us amongst many other distinguished speakers. So again, that's October 25th and 26th here at the Paley Center. For those of you who are invited guests this evening, and are not yet members, we invite you to join this very special community. Now, back to this evening's event. We have an exceptional panel for you tonight featuring the commissioners of all four major sports leagues. It is not often that they appear together, and we are absolutely thrilled and honored to have them all here with us tonight. On your far left is the National Hockey League Commissioner, Gary Bettman. To his right is National Football League Commissioner Roger Goodell. Next to him, the Major League Baseball Commissioner, Rob Manfred Jr. National Basketball Association Commissioner Adam Silver. And, of course, David Zaslav, President and CEO of Discovery Communications, who is moderating tonight. Okay, for those of you on social media, hashtag PaleyMC, and I'll turn it over to you, David.
Great. Thanks, Maureen. And as a board member of Paley, I'd like to just thank you for all the great work that you do to make this organization so much more potent and relevant and exciting. So thank you. So this is a special night for me. These guys have the job, I think, that all of us growing up and today. This is the dream team right here. I mean, extraordinary. The dream team because of what they've done, but the dream team also because they have such an impact on our youth. They have such an impact on our culture, and they're the leaders in media. We all follow them, and they've handled themselves with such great dignity, and they've created a path that we're all following, and we've all been able to create a lot of value. So it's very exciting. I'm going to really enjoy this moment also because I'm probably the only guy, maybe in the last couple of years and in the years ahead, that have any control over any discussion that goes on with these four guys. So it is pretty unique as an evening. I think it's the first time ever that these four have been on one stage. And it's a unique time. It's a unique time because the world is changing. The way people consume content is changing. Their behavior is changing. The platforms that they consume it on is changing. And the economic models are changing. And these are issues that these leaders are going to have to face. They're going to have to face all of those facts and try and emerge as the winners. So I thought I would start with a very kind of a level set, just to give us a sense of the scale of what the four of them deal with. $22 billion a year in sports fees, another $9 billion in retrans, and most of us in the industry feel like the real push behind that retrans dollars is some or all of their IP and their great live sports. They're more than 50% of the cost of content to every American that buys multi-channel television. They're the most powerful, the most must-have. They're truly live. They're the top of the food chain. They have the power to build assets, and they have the power to tip assets. So I'm going to be very nice to them tonight. So let's start with Adam. We'll just go down just to kind of get us started. Simple question. What is the state of, Adam, of the NBA today? And what are the key challenges and opportunities that you face today different from a few years ago?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Maureen, and thank you all for being here tonight. And if there are any questions about the Knicks, in case you can't see from the back, Jim Dolan is sitting in the front row. So I just want to. The state of the NBA is fantastic. We just came, you know, I think, appreciate your introduction in terms of the power of sports, but at the same time you hear about the demise of sports lately, and especially in terms of the breakup of the bundle and the demise of sports ratings. But you know, it's quite remarkable when you look at, in terms of the rating points that are represented here. I think 88 out of the top 100 rated shows last year were live sports events, and that's up from just 5 years ago where it was 39, and from 10 years ago where it was 14. So our ratings are more than holding their own, and on a relative basis are more important than ever before. And then from, you know, an absolute standpoint, we're coming off our highest rated finals in 19 years, and it was only 5 games. I wish there had been more, but it was highest rated in 19 years. I know that, Rob, you're coming off your highest rated World Series in lots of years. I know Roger's coming off, I think, not necessarily the highest rated, but the most watched Super Bowl in the history of the world. And Gary's coming off a big increase in Stanley Cup. So I think, just speaking on behalf of all of us, the state of the industry is terrific.
So, Rob, give us your sense of Major League Baseball domestically and internationally, and give us a sense of maybe a challenge for you and maybe a challenge for all of you that you're facing today.
Well, we're excited about where the sport is. I think for us the biggest story right now is the influx of young players. You saw it at the All-Star game in Miami, a whole set of faces that people not all that familiar with. Huge story here in New York, obviously, Aaron Judge. You know, lived up to his billing, certainly in the home run derby. Domestically, we feel really good about our product. As Adam mentioned, we had a wonderful fall last year, and you know, have been able to build on that. We feel like it's really given us momentum this year. Our in-season ratings are up and strong. In terms of challenges, I mean, I think, you know, one of the topics I'm sure we'll talk about tonight, Adam referred to it, you know, for us, the changing media landscape is really a challenge. Our clubs probably have more riding on regional sports networks that may be, you know, one of the most vulnerable parts of the bundle going forward, and that's certainly an issue. And then I think for all of us, the next generation is different in terms of the way they think about sports. They don't play sports as much as we did, and you know, the best way to get a fan is to get a kid to play, and so that's a challenge, I think for all of us.
Roger, just in my lifetime, the NFL has eclipsed, I think, anything any of us imagined. What was the secret sauce of the growth of the NFL? And as you look at the NFL today, what of that secret sauce do you have to keep going or is vulnerable?
Well, I think all forwards are probably good. It always starts with the quality of the game. I mean, it's about what you're offering the consumer and the fan. And I don't think our game has ever been stronger. I think it's more competitive than it's ever been. The guys who play the game are extraordinary on and off the field. And I think the competitiveness is what I think gives everybody hope when they start the season. When we start our season, we have no idea who's going to end up winning the Super Bowl. And we've always had a record of having teams go from last to first and first to last. And I think all of us try to find a competitive balance and give our fans the hope. So I think that's really number one for us. But as both Adam and Rob said, and I'm sure Gary would agree, live content in today's media landscape is a great thing to have. I actually love our cards sitting up here because I believe live is really going to be a differentiation for all of media, in my view. And so for us, I sort of like where we are.
Gary, the NHL suffered through a strike. They came back. It's stronger than it's ever been. It's resonating here in the U.S. in ways that I think would have surprised a lot of people 10 years ago. And you have a sport that really resonates outside the U.S., particularly in Northern Europe and Eastern Europe. What's going on with the NHL, and how did you kind of accelerate it? And what's special about the NHL that's a little bit different than some of the other sports from your perspective?
All three of the other sports are terrific, and I subscribe to everything my colleagues said. But from our standpoint, we've had some challenges with our union for as long as I've been commissioner, and we actually, as you alluded to it, I call it a work stoppage. The union goes crazy when you call it a strike. It was a lockout, and we had to give up a season to get a system that made sense for us. And that system, which consists of sharing 50-50 with the players with 3 levels of hard caps, did 2 things. One, it stabilized the business, and as a result, a decade later, our ownership and our economics are the healthiest they've ever been. Our franchises are the strongest they've ever been. And like the NFL, we have extraordinary competitive balance. You don't know who's going to make the playoffs. Once the playoffs begin, anything can happen. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of what we're presenting. What makes us a little bit different, 25% of our players come from outside of North America, 50% of our players come from Canada, and the rest in the United States. We've never seen more youth participation than we're having now. The registrations of hockey players, young players with USA Hockey is at an all-time high, and they say for every player you get 3.1 fans, and our fan base continues to grow. We played at 95% of capacity in the regular season, more than 100% of capacity in the playoffs. Testament to standing room. That's how you do that. But we have enormous opportunities. Historically, we have been underserved by traditional media, and HD TV and all the digital platforms and social media for us represents an opportunity where we haven't been as well served as the other 3 sports in terms of national media. You know, under our current agreement with NBC, now we're celebrating our 100th year this year. Makes us the 2nd oldest of the 4, only behind baseball. This is our 100th season and 125th year of the Stanley Cup. But this is the first national TV contract in the United States where all of the games of the playoffs are on national television. And we never had that before, which is one of the reasons, I think, in terms of the size of our audience, not their avidity, but the size has always been impacted by underexposure, coupled with the fact that if you look at our footprint going back to as late as the mid-'60s, we were in 4 U.S. cities. Obviously now with 31 teams, a new team in Las Vegas, our footprint is broader than it's ever been. But we have a great opportunity to grow in places and in ways that we've never been able to do it before because we're getting more exposure in more places. And you know, people make fun of us because we fight to preserve a franchise in Arizona of all places, but one of the stars for the ages who just played his first year for the Toronto Maple Leafs came from Scottsdale, Arizona. And he will tell you that if it wasn't for the fact that his uncle is a 4-year-old, took him to a Coyotes game, he probably never would have played hockey. So we have, we think, an enormous opportunity to continue to grow.
I'm just curious. You said 100th anniversary, but 125th
Stanley Cup.
Can you tell me what happened to the other 20? I wasn't around.
Nor was I, and neither of us will be around for the second point. No. This was the Lord Stanley of Preston, the Governor General, the Queen's representative to Canada, donated this cup to enhance whatever competition there were among amateur teams. We kind of took it over when we became, you know, the elite league for hockey anywhere. So, but it is an iconic trophy, as we all know. We don't make a new one up every year. It's the same one.
That didn't take long, did it?
So you each used
And we don't have to deal with Tiffany's, so you know how that goes.
You each used the word growth. And certainly over the last 20 years, it's been an extraordinary story here in the U.S. Very different from outside the U.S. of growth. Subs have been growing, big broadcast deals, regional sports, being able to take your IP and sell it to a number of different players. And you've been able to, all of you, see growth because your IP has been able to drive asset value. Two things are happening now. More people that are younger are starting to consume content off of the television set. We're all starting to see that. And new players are trying to capture the attention of the younger demographic through different platforms, different types of content. So, Adam, when you think about the fact that subscribers are declining, there is a secular decline that's been going on for a while on broadcast cable. What does that mean for you and your IP, and how do you recapture those that are no longer on that platform?
You know, so for us, it means we're going to embrace sort of new media and new ways for that younger generation to consume our content. To your point, where you're saying young people are starting to consume more content, in essence, on their phones. It's interesting, the lines just crossed last year. For the first time, millennials watch more video on their phones than televisions. It's quite remarkable. And I think so for us, you know, sort of looking out into the future, the question is, you know, the way I tend to think of it is, rather than thinking, let's say, over the last 6 years or so, that basic cable has gone from 100 million homes to 85 million homes, I think of our universe having gone from 100 million to 200 million, which is just in the United States, which is essentially the install base for smartphones, of people then who are available to watch our programming. And I think the real challenge, and it's an interesting one for us, is it doesn't just become a question of how are we going to take these same feeds that traditionally have been seen, like David Levy's here, a partner from Turner, on TNT or ESPN or ABC, and then put them on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or whatever else. I think the challenge is, how do we take advantage of those new platforms and present those games in a much different way, taking advantage of those huge social media communities and the engagement that comes with that type of viewership. And it's a fascinating challenge. The four of us were actually we weren't all on a panel together, so you're right, the first time we ever, but we were all, of course. But it's interesting, you know, we were all just at that too. We were at a conference together, and it's interesting, and each one of us took turns meeting with the head of content from Facebook and Apple and YouTube and Twitter, who were talking to us all, because they realized, sort of the way your introduction went, that the way they're over time going to differentiate their services, and throw Amazon in the mix too, from each other, is by having exclusive premium content. And no surprise, they then come to sports leagues and they see sort of how we've been historically the battering ram for so many new platforms. And so guess what? They're coming and saying, but for us, and I think what makes it most interesting, it's not just, all right, here's a new cable network, let's use sports to drive viewership or drive distribution. I think the conversations that I know we're all having is, it's not, let's take that same feed and put it on Facebook or wherever else. How are we going to change the experience for our fans? How are we going to take advantage of the kind of engagement that they have with our users? And I think, you know, whether, and we see it already now, there's forms of engagement that come through fantasy, daily fantasy, other ways, other types of community activities. I think now people create their own. I'm sure a lot of people in this room, like I do it. If I'm watching an NBA game, I'll hardly ever put down my phone or my iPad, and I might be on Twitter, and there's a whole community out there of commentators who maybe are saying one thing on air during halftime, but you're getting sort of a play-by-play separate experience from what you're hearing on television, and you're getting it from as many voices as you choose to follow about what their insights are in the game. So to me, and it's a really interesting time for the industry, because I think we're going to be forced to have to reinvent ourselves as well.
But I mean, all of that is true, and you know, at this point, as you participate with these different platforms, and you have a fully healthy ecosystem, but how do you? These are not platforms that are.
Just made a big investment in Eurosport, so he's getting a little nervous.
When you're dealing, I'm trying to do a little of what you guys did. You do have this challenge that the economics that the existing broadcasters and cable players have been willing to pay, because of the extraordinary economics of the basic cable model and retrans, has created this growth. And so, Rob, you went out very early and said direct to consumer. You know, it's very clear that if you can get additive dollars, like you did, Roger, with Verizon, it's all additive. But if the traditional platform starts to decline, can you get enough dollars from those other platforms? But direct to consumer you were the first one out there.
Right, and I think the key word in your question was additive, right? I mean, we are very aware of the need to preserve the cable model, and the cable model is going to continue to exist. It's not going to be the same size, may not look exactly like it looks today, but it's going to be there. And we have tried to do things that we see as additive to our business without causing undue harm to that existing model. The example you point to, MLB.TV, is a perfect example, right? In the market, we're delivering, in each team's home market, we're delivering the games in a traditional cable model. Today, if they're streamed by whoever owns those rights. Outside the market, games, so I'm in Boston, I'm a Yankee fan, we'll sell you an additional product that is not otherwise available in the cable system, and we view that as additive to our overall economics. Now, we went a while where, you know, all that we were doing OTT was really through BAM. You know, hats off to Bob Bowman, who's in the back of the room here somewhere. More recently, we've come to the conclusion that you got to be on all these platforms, and that's why, as Adam points out, you know, Facebook and Twitter, and we're doing those games to try to deliver the product in a way that gets to people who have either never been in or who have opted out of that cable model. Can you, and whether you can replicate your economics, it depends on where the mix settles, right? Between the core cable model that remains and, you know, some of these new media and how creative people are in terms of monetizing on those platforms. So,
Roger, you've been one of the masters of taking your IP, and you've been in business with almost everyone, so you can reach with all the great platforms. But now we have these new platforms. How do you decide? You did this deal with Verizon. That's a deal with you. It's not a deal with Les at CBS. So when you're thinking about the value chain of putting your content on Facebook, on Amazon, on YouTube, on Apple, on Verizon or AT&T, when then the existing structure of CBS and ABC and ESPN, does that become a street fight at some point? No. Everyone's going to want all the rights. You're going to want to hold back. How do you decide, and how do you put the values on it?
Well, David, I may take a little bit of a different viewpoint. I believe that sports are actually going to become more valuable. If you look at the performance of what we've done, if you just look at the NFL, and I'll speak to the NFL because I know it better, but we were the #1 show with Fox on Sunday afternoon in all of television. We were the #1 primetime show with Sunday Night Football. Thursday Night Football was the #2 on NBC and #3 on CBS. So we believe that our content actually becomes more valuable because it's unique, it's special. And I think one of the things we're all, and I think Adam referred to it, as we look at all the new players out there, what we're trying to do is prove that our content actually can make networks. They can create value for their consumers and for the company. And I think we're starting to see that. And I believe that ultimately live sports will do just what it did for cable television, just what it did for satellite television, and it will make platforms. And I do believe that. For us, we want to be on all of them. So Thursday night's a great example of it. Thursday night we're on CBS and NBC on the network. We're on the NFL network all season long. And then we're also on Amazon for the first time. And Amazon sees the value of that. It doesn't hurt the value of our network partners. And we're very sensitive to that. And we're a little different because primarily our product's on network television, which we believe in. We believe that its best days are still ahead, and it still draws a huge audience. So we want to be on all those platforms, and we believe that our best days, as well as all the sports, are still ahead.
Now, when you think about being on all platforms, do you think about, you look at Netflix, the high flyer the last 2 days, it's been a high flyer for 2 or 3 years. It's kind of the platform of choice. The multiple is almost infinite because they have a direct relationship.
Amazon's not doing too bad.
Amazon's doing good.
Yeah.
So is Facebook. But this idea of owning the customer, as you think about, each of you have super fan groups. You can do exactly what you're doing, but you could also have subscribers that go directly to you. So, how do you think about that, Roger? And then Gary, a little bit about your new media strategy.
Well, I also think that's a great place for mobile. I think Adam was referring to it. We have great partners. We actually have the same mobile partner in Verizon, and it's a growing audience. Everybody has a phone in this room, I presume, and everybody's using it more and more for video, for content. And so we want to be there. And so we're all working with our partners, Verizon, obviously to figure out how do we deliver more content to those fans the way they want it, whether it's in highlights or whether it's in the full-length content. That is obviously a shift that's going to continue. And so we look at that as an opportunity for us to go direct to consumer and to be able to do it with partners who, frankly, we believe deliver high-quality product. We love partnership models. Our partners do things better than we do, and that's why we partner with them, is that they can deliver something that we can't do individually. We have our own network, we run it ourselves, but we believe that our network partners can produce high-quality content and make our sport even better.
Gary, I think one of the sports that helped change the game in terms of how people consume content was the Olympics where everybody wanted to watch the hockey. And if you looked at the statistics on how many young people, maybe because of the time, were watching hockey on a different platform than traditional television. When you think of offering all of your games, how do you think about new media, and how do you think about creating more asset value for your owners?
Well, first of all, using all of the new opportunities, all of the new platforms gives us a way to reach fans we haven't been able to reach before. Because if you go back and whether it was the 11 o'clock news or Sports Center, historically we got less coverage than everybody else did for a variety of reasons, including, as I mentioned before, not having as much national exposure. We now can deliver content to more people without any disintermediation. We can deliver it live when you want it, what you want, which is what our fans tell us they want, because they tend to be affluent, tech-savvy, and well-educated. But I think for us, while all of these new platforms and opportunities are just that, the value proposition, I think as Roger said, is live sports is going, subject to one caveat I'll get to, is going to continue to be valuable, and it's just a question of making sure that you get value, because I don't think any of us want to experience what happened in the music industry. Because if you just start giving away content, you're never going to preserve the value for it. And as long as people are going to want sports, which we believe on a whole host of levels, including what drives communities together, where people from diverse backgrounds get together and have a common rooting interest, what sports represents in terms of either role models or physical fitness, all those things are important, and that's why sports will continue to be a vibrant part of community in the entertainment industry. The bigger concern isn't so much how we slice and dice it and preserve value, is making sure that millennials and Gen Zs continue to want to watch team sports. You know, the people talk about esports, and maybe it's a generational thing. I'm the oldest one on this panel. I don't get tens of thousands of people going to an arena to watch esports. I mean, watching our sports, I get it, but they do it. And we have to make sure that we are relevant in all ways possible to young people who are having to choose how they spend their leisure time.
You know, you talk about esports, which does seem to be kind of this big growing opportunity, let's say. But for each of you, gaming has been a huge youth push, and it's probably been a gateway for each of you. Like when you think of gaming and the NBA, what kind of role did that play? For us, it was trading cards. Right. For my kids, they were playing the NBA, MLB. They were playing, and they knew all the players' names. They knew it through the games.
Right. Well, you know, I just amplify Gary's point. It's not just tens of thousands of people watching e-gaming competitions in arenas. It's hundreds of millions of people now watching e-gaming competitions, largely over-the-top services like Twitch and YouTube, you know, and other video distribution mechanisms. So we're continuing to embrace it. I think traditionally, you're right, it's been a business and a marketing tool for us. I mean, right now, just take NBA 2K, we have about 9 million units in the market, and with enormous engagement, largely from young people who are learning the game, learning the players. But so now, to take that to the next step, we're seeing the enormous interest in e-gaming, and Jim's very involved in this. We're in the process of forming, in essence, a new league. And I'm sure David Levy's going to be involved in as well. He's sort of experimenting in e-gaming. And what we're doing is taking that NBA 2K game and turning it into a 5-on-5 e-gaming competition. And we're going to be launching next year. 17 of our 30 teams are launching with teams. And it's not, the difference is for those who are gamers, these are not NBA players that imagery, the images that will be participating. It's not their avatars. These are professional athletes who play video games for a living. Many of them are represented by the same agencies that represent our players. Many of them make well over $1 million a year, and they're going to be engaging in these competitions. They're going to be hired, training together, and competing, and people will watch these competitions in arenas, and people will watch these games through various distribution systems. And I think for us, it's a little bit of a twofer, because we get the benefit of promoting the game of NBA basketball and interest in the game, but it's also, we're developing new content and appealing to a new audience as well.
Do you see it that way, Rob? Is that
Well, I think it's
a big part of your kind of gateway strategy, or a growth business?
We do think it's an important source of particularly young fan engagement. We see a lot of opportunity in this space. We have a partnership with Riot Games at BAM Tech. Their game, League of Legends, very popular, and one that we see a lot of growth. We think you can learn a lot from the demographics of the people that are engaging in this activity, and it has carryover in our business. And I think maybe the best demonstration of that carryover is you're seeing some of our owners, some of Rogers' owners investing in these esports leagues, even when, and Adams as well, even where there's not the direct NBA 2K, we're promoting basketball, but that there's a broader kind of complement between esports and the traditional leagues that can be, I think, beneficial to both.
So when you think about esports, Roger, and you think about fantasy leagues, at some point, does that change the way people consume sport and your sport? Does it change the way they watch your games or how they appreciate it? How do you view that?
Yeah, it's a positive, because I've often said I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a fan, a sports fan, than it is today, because you have so many options to consume media. It used to be when I was a kid, you'd wait for the game to show up. Now you don't wait for the game, you go get it. And you have it on any platform you want, you have it immediately, and you don't have to look around very hard for it. So from my standpoint, the fans are really the beneficiaries of all this. Fantasy sports are great for us. We love the E-Leagues. We think it's a great opportunity for us when we're investing in it. Our sponsors, EA, are obviously with Madden game, which is the most popular sports game in the world. I think, other than maybe FIFA, it's close, but it's a really great opportunity. But fantasy drives engagement, and we see it in ratings. We see it with our television partners, where even if your team's out of it, you're going to watch because maybe your fantasy players will perform well in any given weekend. And that's a real plus for engagement. It does potentially have a little bit of a negative view of, do they still have the same loyalty to a team that they once had? But they used to turn the television set off, or they used to get off a platform. Now they're not. They're actually engaging with more football or more of the other sports. That's a huge plus for us. We also see it with Red Zone a little bit. Red Zone teaches you to watch football a little bit differently. Thankfully, it's not having any impact on our broadcast audience, and frankly, I would argue has been an additive. It's increased our audiences. So, you have to be willing, and I think you said it today, actually. You have to be willing to cannibalize yourself. You have to give the viewer what they want when they want it. So you have to go out there and do it. Whether you think it may have a short-term, even a long-term impact on it, you better get in there and get it.
See, I love Red Zone, and I've been on the other side.
I want you to love Red Zone, by the way.
When Netflix first came out, this idea of watching content without commercials, we had it on HBO, we had it on Showtime, but the big danger was that over a longer period of time, it changes behavior. And I guess that's as you start to offer content on different platforms, does it become additive, or does it change the way?
I think it's additive, and I would tell you that I think when people watch, and we see it in our own research, and we're doing a lot on game presentation as well as the other leagues, but Rob in particular, how do we make our game more engaging? So we're taking actually commercial breaks out. We're taking less breaks so that we don't give them a reason to turn the channel or to look at another device. We want them to be engaged with that game. We're looking to see how we take dead time out, whether that's through our rules or instant replay. Nobody really wants to watch the officials running around figuring out what's going on. They want to watch action. So for our job is to try to make that the most engaging experience by the way we stage our game, both in the stadium and on media devices. And that's the critical component for us, is how do we make that experience better and don't give the fan an opportunity to turn the channel or to move to another device.
What's the line with the with these new companies that are on the line of betting, with Hank and Tom here with the new business that's playing along that line, that seems to be quite engaging? At what point is there a comfort zone, and what's the comfort, Gary, when you think about those new businesses, many of which your owner is invested in, new ones that are coming along? How do you see those?
Well, first of all, as it relates to any touch point you can give a fan so that they can consume the sport, get as much information, do as many activities, engage with as many other fans as possible, whatever the device is, that's a plus, including giving them a second screen experience if they want it for statistics or replays or whatever they want, because particularly for younger people, this is what they want. The YouTube generation is used to creating its own content and watching things and consuming things the way they want, so we need to be responsive to that. Using video games, if we go back 15 or 20 years, I can't tell you the number of people that told me that they or their kids learned the rules of hockey by playing video games when we were in a new market and they hadn't been exposed to hockey before. And using esports with our games to create more of a community, more of a competition under the guise of either the league or a team is just another way to keep people involved, because we're competing for leisure time and leisure dollars. On the issue of betting, probably Rob and I are not the best spokesman for what makes sense or doesn't, because we're a small part of the betting that goes on. Football, basketball, both at the pro and college levels, is where, 98% of the betting goes on. I don't worry about fixing games. I don't worry about anything other than, from our standpoint, what does it do to the way young people consume sports? Do they look at it as a vehicle for a healthy competition with role models, or do they look at it as a device to make or lose money on a bet? And secondly, what does it do to the environment? And this is something we had a focus on with respect to the Las Vegas team, the Golden Knights. What will it do to the environment in a stadium or in an arena if everybody's sitting there just worrying about their bets? Does it turn us into something other than what we've been, more like either a racetrack or a highlight fronton? Not that those are bad, it's just different than what we are. And those are the things that we have to focus on.
But even that's changing. What Gary says in terms of betting on outcomes of games is true, but the fact of the matter is, as a source of engagement, betting is really on more discrete activities. The growth area is on more discrete activities in the game. Is the next pitch a ball or a strike? How many baskets is he going to get in the next 2 minutes? I mean, those are the sorts of bets that are going on, and there is a continuum that you have to think hard about. Adam on Twitter while he's watching a game seems harmless enough, but it's an additive form of fan engagement. And then you get to daily fantasy, right, where we thought that we were pretty comfortable with the idea that it was a game of skill and therefore legal, and that's why we became involved in daily fantasy. But obviously, a source of fan engagement. And then you get into actual sports betting, and it seems to me that there's a difference between somebody betting on whether the next pitch is going to be a ball or a strike, which very hard for anybody to affect or control, as opposed to the outcome of a game, which, you know, a little different.
I would agree with that.
And I'll just jump in on that point. I'd say I think the NBA may be a little bit unique among leagues in that we've embraced sports betting outside the United States. I mean, we're a very popular betting property in Europe, for example, and I hear Gary about the notion of sports fans more focused on a spread, you know, and not necessarily their team winning. But I think the research generally shows fans are fairly sophisticated and that they can both root for their team. And to Rob's point, I mean, it's virtually all of the action. You know, you get the direct data from those betting companies, and about 85% of the action is now so-called in play. So people don't have the attention spans they used to. It's not as if they want to, you know, bet the Knicks and then wait for 3 hours and see what happened. They want to bet throughout the game. And so they're betting on, you know, all kinds of, on quarter scores, on particular players, on free throws and everything else. And, you know, independent of whatever revenue stream may result from licensing our intellectual property to those gaming companies, it results in enormous additional engagement in fans. And I think whether, you know, typically, you know, as Roger said, you might have a sports fan who's turning off a contest because the game is out of reach for their team or whatever else, or it's a blowout. I mean, here there's a completely independent reason to continue watching. And my sense is there's, you know, there's a case that's now before the Supreme Court about something Governor Christie's tried to do in New Jersey. There's talk in the legislature. My sense is that the law will change in the next few years in the United States. And I think it's not as much at the end of the day, you know, our leagues being for or against sports betting. It's more a function of being realist. It's a multi-$100 billion illegal industry in the United States, and I think ultimately as the owners of the intellectual property, we're going to embrace it and also make sure our integrity is protected at the same time.
You know, it's an interesting time in our country. I think one of the things that you each have spoken to is the power of sport and the amount of time that people spend watching live sport, the demographic being broad across male, female, and what a huge impact it has. And many people have said, and I believe this, that content has more of an impact on culture than politics, politicians, or armies. We have lived through the last 15 years of very low growth here in the U.S. Wages are down and pretty high unemployment. And there's a sense of challenge throughout our country. And each of you have taken on a really important, I believe, role, a leadership voice in how each of your leagues represent the values of our country and the values that we all want to grow up and live by. So I thought maybe each of you could talk about what role you think you play or how important that is. You dealt with it pretty just coming right out of the box right after you took office.
Right, well,
in some way.
Yeah, in some way, and I'd say I think that we collectively can play a role as a unifier in society. To your point, a very divided society, and I think that there's commonality in sports, there's commonality in the way that people come together in stadiums and arenas. They're in many ways equivalent of modern, you know, houses of worship or, you know, town halls that don't necessarily exist the way they once did in major metropolitan areas or a major factor in sort of urban areas. And I think in our sport in particular, we're at, I think, the fault line of society in many ways. I think in terms of race relations in this country, and I think it's one that I'd say a responsibility that we embrace, working directly with our players. I think it's incumbent on us to provide a safe environment for our players to feel comfortable speaking out on important issues, to know that they are multi-dimensional people, to make that, you know, I get upset. I often hear from fans who say, because the league did this or a player said something, that I'll never come to your game again. And of course that would concern me. At the same time, I feel that we should be working towards a society where people are comfortable with knowing that that the fact that somebody expresses a different point of view doesn't mean you can't find commonality with them. And I think there are ways that we actively can work toward bringing people together.
Each of you are dealing, Rob, each of you are dealing with young kids that are extraordinarily talented, but also have gotten a lot quickly. And how do you deal with that?
You know, when we think about how fans look at our game, we start with the diversity of the game. You know, 29% of our players come from outside the U.S. Huge Latino presence. Another 9% are African American. And even within our domestic group, right, you think about it, probably more diversity, rural, urban, northern, southern, and candidly, Republicans and Democrats, maybe more so than a lot of other sports. And, you know, I think the most important message to young people is that those people go out 162 times in 183 days and they play what people regard to be the quintessential team game. And that's the most important message that we can send. Secondly, we are really fortunate with our players. We spend a lot of time, particularly with players that come from outside the U.S., educating them about the importance of projecting to our fans the kind of role model that we want young people to see. It's an important part of the sport, and I think that, you know, our players are to be commended. With really few exceptions, they go out and they represent the sport great, but it's not without a lot of effort.
Now, the two of you have contact sports, which kind of presents, I think, an additional issue of a sport that has some real contact.
We like that, by the way. I think Americans love that. Just to the point, I think sports are a unifier. I believe that communities as well as the nation come around. Super Bowl is a day when, you know, people come together and they forget their differences for a little while and celebrate who we are. And I think the values of who we are in the sport itself, competitiveness and integrity and perseverance, those are things that we as Americans are proud of. And that's part of who we are in our culture. So I think, and I'll speak for our sport, I believe we represent that. I believe other sports do. And I think teamwork is something that's actually lost in that because you don't succeed in the NFL without a great team. You can be a great individual player, but it's all about teamwork. And that is something that I think is fundamental to who we are as Americans. I do believe that. And I think sports become almost an escape from the daily stuff that we see every day that tires all of us to some extent. And so we have that ability to sort of say, you know what, let's forget that for a few hours and watch a game and feel good about who we are as Americans and feel good about what we do. And our players are increasingly seen as leaders in their communities, and that's a great thing. We're proud of what they do on and off the field. I think they're held to a higher standard than anybody else in our communities, but they meet it, and I think that's a tribute to them. And I know they believe in what they're talking about from a value standpoint in the community, and that's something that I think will only benefit us long term.
Gary, your sport, you have this balance of sometimes allowing, you know, one-on-one confrontation. How do you think about that, and how do you think about how you deal with violence in sport?
You mean physicality, you don't mean violence.
Shoulders.
Let's back up a second. This notion that sports, all of our sports, can help bring people together. We represent diversity, inclusiveness, all of which is important. I think all the sports can make a difference and do make a difference in people's lives, particularly young people. Yes, it's teamwork, but it's physical fitness, it's hard work, it's leadership, it's getting an education, all of the things that we can set an example on, and we have, a number of our clubs have programs in the inner city that do make a difference in people's lives and gives them an opportunity to do things they would never be able to do, whether or not it's ice hockey in Harlem or Snyder hockey in Philadelphia, where kids who are lost, literally, in the system wind up in college. When Ed Snyder started Snyder hockey in Philadelphia, the high school graduation in Philadelphia from the school system was 40%. The graduation rate for Snyder hockey throughout its existence has been 95%. And these are kids who are getting an education and going on to do better things. The issue of physicality, and I think I probably speak for Roger on this as well, player safety has always been a paramount concern. The issue of fisticuffs in hockey gets overblown. It's an extremely small part of the game, but we have nonstop action. The game's played very physically, very fast, very much on the edge, and to suggest that it may act as a thermostat wouldn't be an exaggeration, because you have guys skating at each other at 30 miles an hour where physical contact's encouraged, and by the way, they're carrying sticks. So if that turns out, but by the way, overwhelmingly, fighting is at its lowest point in the history of the game, and probably over 70–75% of our games don't have a fight in them. And so I think that gets to be a distraction, both from the media and from other quarters where somebody's trying to prove a point. But at the end of the day, what people expect from our game and from football is physicality, and we've both worked very hard, both leagues, to make sure the game is as safe as possible.
So let's go to a couple of questions. We're almost out of time. Yep.
Hi, thank you guys for coming. Thank you. This is for Commissioner Goodell. The Play 60 and your flag football program is remarkable. I was a coach, kids played it, well run, great rules, great way to introduce young kids to sports, which I'm sure is a concern of yours. It does leave kids unprepared when they get into high school if they've never played contact sports before. And when they're in high school and they're up against formidable opponents who have been playing contact sports, they are very likely to get more injured because they're not ready to take a hit and they're not prepared to give a hit. And they're getting injured at a higher rate. Are you concerned about that?
You're going to have to give me some source of your data, because I've never heard that before. Is that just your experience?
Well,
because I've never heard that data.
It's my experience.
Because we have a lot of NFL players that never played the game until they were actually in high school.
It's my experience, and we're up against, and our family is trying to get football re-embraced in our community, and we're up against school administrators who are trying to essentially create this false perception of danger at the high school level. And we're trying to figure out how to essentially create a movement in our town so that football can become re-embraced. And that's what we're up against.
Yeah.
So what do you do to get the real data out about what's going on?
No, but I think that's the point. I think the facts are that people have very bad information. And so we have a USA Football, someone mentioned USA Hockey or USA Basketball. We try to get that information out into the parents' hands about the safety of our sport and the fact that I believe kids can play the game safely. And in fact, it's much safer than when I played as a kid. I would want my kids to play. Now I have twin girls, but the game is a great game that you want to play, and it's safer than it's ever been. And the statistics actually show that, both at the professional level, the college level, high school level, and the youth level. And one of the problems I think we all face as an industry is kids are playing less sports, and in fact playing one sport and specializing in that on a year-round basis. I don't think there's anything worse than that, in my view. Now, I played football, basketball, and baseball in high school, but I couldn't wait for the next season. I couldn't wait to get there, and I think kids are missing something when they're not playing multiple sports. And so for us, we want to get kids active. You mentioned Play 6, you meant flag football, but our numbers in high school football are very level. But all of us have seen decreases. Gary mentioned his are up. That may be true. The only sports I've seen that have actually increased in the last couple of years are lacrosse and rugby, interestingly enough. But it's hard to get good data there, too.
Yes?
I'd be interested to hear how all the leagues feel about, I'd be interested to know how all the leagues feel about responsibility, if any, for the players after they have finished their careers. Is that a league responsibility to look forward to what's happening to them or not?
Sure, I'll start. In fact, in the most recent round of collective bargaining that we just finished, and Jim was very involved in this, we made a decision to provide lifetime health insurance to any player who ever played in our league. Every single player ever played in the NBA, and I think we feel enormous responsibility to them. We have programs for them throughout the time that they're in the league. We work with them on savings programs. As Rob and Roger both referenced, I mean, we work very strongly with them, especially when they come in the league, on programs about saving money and life skills and everything else. So I think, and on top of that, we have a lot of veterans who are involved in the league in many different capacities, whether it's coaches, general managers, presidents. We have former players who are owners now in our league. So it really is a lifetime relationship with those players.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all the same in a lot of ways. I mean, we have unbelievable pension plans. You know, you vest in a pension after one day in the major leagues. You get health benefits for life, and we're no different than everybody else. You know, we've gone back at various times and given pensions to people who didn't. When we had more strict vesting rules, we went back and gave pensions to former employees. I think that the kind of emerging thing is the post-career employment option. You know, we have programs where we try to help place former players interested in working in the game, in jobs in the game, but also to give them other opportunities, you know, entrepreneurship, whatever programs that we work with our Players Association on. And I know just from putting ours together, because we stole from everybody else, it's all kind of the same across leagues.
Yeah, but I do think there's a real responsibility of the leagues, and we all take it seriously, of helping players transition from their playing careers, because all of us are players of long careers, 30s. And you got a whole lifetime ahead of you and a whole career. And so getting them to focus on that. When I met with the draft eligible players on the day they were drafted, so it was 24 of them in Philadelphia, the first thing I asked them, how many of you think about your life beyond football? And it's a pretty hard thing to ask a kid who's about to walk out in front of 80,000 people and get drafted. But we have programs that require them to start thinking about that, and that consistently show them that now is the time to start focusing on that. Take advantage of your off season. Use the platform that you have as an NFL player to develop a career. And we have 6,000 former players that are actually working, we call them legends, that are actually working in that regard. So we take it very seriously, as the other leagues do.
We all have rookie orientation programs. We have transition to real life programs where you can go back to school, get an education, get trained for a career, have internships. We, in our last collective bargaining agreement, amended the pension plan so that there would, in effect, be more income down the road for players who might not be as careful with their money as they're playing. But there's always a little bit of a tension there, because the agents and the players' associations typically don't want the teams and the leagues to have too much control over what the players have.
Try zero.
Well, exactly. And so that's something we all wrestle with, but we try to work together to make sure that the resources are there so that players have, you know, if you play in any one of our leagues and have a career, you should be set financially for life. And it's really a tragedy when that doesn't happen.
Jim, did you have a...
You wouldn't think I'd have a question.
Or need a mic.
Right. But I don't own a baseball team, and I got a baseball question. Wimbledon was just played this last weekend, and we saw men's players serving serves at up to 130 miles an hour. Nobody pitches that fast, right?
No.
They were able to use technology to determine, right, whether that ball was in or out by as little as an eighth of an inch. So why do we have umpires behind they're calling strikes and balls?
Well, I asked you that at dinner the other day.
First of all, let me say, our umpires are really, really good at calling balls and strikes. They are. Trust me on this. You know, let me say something about the tennis technology, and then I'll say why it's more difficult in baseball. You know, you should always think about a technology where what they show you as part of the replay is a simulation as opposed to the actual stop frame. So think about that when you're watching tennis and see what conclusion you come to. our strike zone is not a single line on a fixed court, right? It's a plate. It's three-dimensional. The ball passes through the strike zone at different points. We do have a system that we use in broadcasts that measures balls and strikes. In all candor, that technology has a larger margin of error than we see with human umpires. Someday, I think it will be up to the task of calling balls and strikes, but I actually believe that at that point you have to ask yourself a question as to whether you want to take that human element out of the game and replace it with a machine.
We agree with that.
Yep.
I think that the Major League umpires do an unbelievable job, by the way. As Mr. Manfred.
You are the rare fan, I will tell you.
Well, look, everybody gets squeezed once in a while. Mr. Manfred, as a LA Dodger fan, I'm wondering what the Major League Baseball is doing about 3/4 of the Los Angeles population not having access to Los Angeles Dodgers baseball, specifically Clayton Kershaw.
Right. Well, I will tell you, you managed to find the single question that I like less than anyone that I get asked. Okay. I'm glad I didn't ask it. Right. No, I'd actually rather do the umpire thing, to tell you the truth. But look, LA is a bad situation for our sport. You know, when you have a major market where, you know, only 30% of the homes have the ability to get the games, that's a bad thing. It's something that has been of great concern to us over a substantial period of time. We talk regularly with all the parties that have a seat at that table. Unfortunately, we are really not one of them. We have no economic interest in this particular dispute. We have tried mightily to find some common ground. We had some optimism. We thought a transaction might help. That didn't turn out to be the answer. But there will be a reordering, I think, of the RSNs in the LA market at some point in time, and hopefully a reordering that will bring this distribution dispute to the end. The only thing I can tell you is, from baseball's perspective, we will continue to do everything we possibly can to get distribution of those games.
As a follow-up, how does it enhance the brand of the Los Angeles Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't enhance the brand of the Dodgers.
Off the record.
I think the Dodgers would tell you that, you know. I mean, you know, it's not a good thing from the Dodgers' perspective. But as I'm sure you realize, you know, you make a deal with an RSN, what they get in terms of distribution is also, to a large measure, out of the hands of the club. You know, they made a TV rights deal. The RSN has to get distribution, and the question is whether distributors are prepared to make that deal.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you very much. How do you think, you all have great competitions within the networks, how do you think about the importance and the development of storytelling narratives as associated with your league's brands? For instance, the Olympics spend a lot of time on developing stories around their athletes. The WWE is all about stories and not about competition. How do you think about storytelling in the context of each of your leagues?
Sure, I'll start. I grew up in the business with Dick Ebersol and NBC being the primary broadcaster of the NBA, and I remember in his office he had a big sign behind his desk that said storytelling. And I think the issue, as opposed to WWE for leagues, is that the stories need to be authentic. And I think that what we're seeing, especially through these various social media platforms, where it demonstrates how multidimensional our players are, I think it helps in that storytelling. I mean, even things knowing where a player is from, you know, what his childhood was like, where he went to high school, if he lived overseas, not just saying he's from Latvia, but where in Latvia, and what was his life like, and where did he play before he came to the Knicks, in the case of Porzingis. I think that's all a form of storytelling, and it's something, again, that we have all these new platforms now, so outside the four corners of our game, that we can be constantly producing and streaming features. You know, I think all these guys referenced it before, that people never would have had access to in the old days. If you didn't happen to see halftime or the pregame show, you wouldn't see the feature. Now if you missed the game, that you can go to one of our websites or Facebook or Twitter or any of these services and see endless amounts of content, and a lot of it is produced by our fans. So it enables for enormous storytelling. But to your point, at the end of the day, that's what makes the drama so special, the stories that are being told, not just raw data and statistics.
I would tell you that it's one of the differences between Adam and I. I grew up with Roone Arledge, so I'm older than him, so who helped Dick Ebersol get that. But it's one of the things. It's when we talk about game presentation, one of the reasons for taking the dead time out is our network partners wanted more time to talk about football, to talk about the stories, to tell you where that individual player came from, what he overcame to get to the field, how he continues to evolve both on and off the field. And that's something we really worked hard with our networks in the off-season to try to give that opportunity to our fans. So I think you'll see more of that in NFL football this year.
You know, it's interesting. I think last year we thought about stories more. You know, our sport in 13, 14, 15 markets over the course of the season will be the #1 rated programming during the summer, right? And the trick for us is to make sure that all those fans in Detroit that made the Tigers #1 stay with us in the postseason. And we really do believe that what happened last year with the Cubs is just the story. The story about the Cubs gave us 40 million people in Game 7, and you know, it is that storyline that's the key to making sure.
My roommate in college was Steve Bartman.
Oh, there you go. The missing Steve Bartman. No one quite knows where he is, but
but that was a great story for the country,
story,
right? Cubs. That's beyond sports. It's just great.
It gives fans a connection to the game. It gives them a rooting interest. It tells them more about what they want to know. And the more we can connect on every level with our fans, the more interested they're going to be.
Okay, thank you all. A big thank you to the commissioners. Sure.